Hey guys, tonight we set foot on one of the most infamous ships in history, a creaking wooden vessel barely large enough to haul barrels of salted meat and a handful of nervous sailors, yet destined to sail straight into the unknown. You stand at the dock of Palos de la Frontera in Spain, squinting against the morning sun, and already you can smell what your life is about to become at fish guts, sweat, and the faint promise of vomit. And let's be honest, you probably won't survive this voyage. Few people would. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. I always love seeing the map light up with night owls, early birds, and those mysterious folks listening at 3 a.m. for reasons I will not question. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You clamber up the gangplank of the Santa Maria, Columbus's flagship, which in your imagination is a mighty vessel, yet in reality, she's about the size of a modern tour Bedtime 095s, 60 feet long, barely 20 feet wide, a floating wooden box with sails that look more decorative than dependable. Columbus commands 3 ships total: the Santa Maria, the Niña, and the Pinta. Historians still argue whether the Niña and Pinta were technically caravels or some hybrid breed of Iberian coastal craft. But either way, none of them were built to carry dozens of men across the endless Atlantic. Your feet hit the planks, and the first thing you notice is how everything already feels cramped before you even leave the harbor. There's no private cabin for you. Those are reserved for the great man himself and maybe a lucky officer or 2. The rest of you, the ordinary crew, are left to stake a patch of deck space or fight over a hammock below. The smell of pitch from freshly caulked seams stings your nose. Every creak of wood and flap of sail reminds you that this ship is not some iron fortress, it is fragile, and you are about to trust your life to it. As you glance around, you spot the sailors who will be your companions for weeks, possibly months. They're not the shining knights of fairy tales. They're rough-faced Andalusian fishermen, a couple of Basque sailors with the hunched shoulders of men who've hauled nets since childhood, and 1 or 2 convicts pardoned on condition they sail west. That's right, you're sharing a voyage with men so untrustworthy that the Crown decided the best place for them was in the middle of the ocean. Comforting. Columbus himself strides about the deck, cloak snapping in the wind, projecting confidence he doesn't always feel. You overhear whispers. Some sailors say he's brilliant. Others mutter he's mad. Historians still debate whether Columbus truly believed he'd reached Asia or simply rebranded his discovery to keep royal patrons happy. But in this moment, he seems like a man with a stubborn gleam in his eye and just enough charisma to keep you from bolting back down the gangplank. The harbor bells toll, ropes groan. With a chorus of shouts, the sails unfurl. You sway as the ship pulls away from the dock, the town shrinking behind you, the cheers of a few locals quickly drowned by the cries of gulls. Ahead lies nothing but a horizon of blue and the creeping suspicion that you've just traded solid ground for a floating coffin. The first day at sea is deceptively gentle. The waves rock you like a cradle, and you tell yourself, maybe it won't be so bad. You lean on the railing, staring out at the sparkling water. But then you notice the deck is already slick with fish scales, spilt tar, and someone else's breakfast. A veteran sailor claps you on the back and mutters that the first week always sorts the landlubbers from the survivors. You smile weakly, praying you're in the latter category. At night, you lie awake, listening to the creak of timbers and the low murmur of sailors telling jokes in dialects you barely understand. Some laugh about mermaids luring men overboard. Others grumble about sea monsters waiting beyond the horizon. The ship rolls and groans, and you hug yourself, trying to ignore the nagging thought that the world might indeed end in an abyss, just as the old maps warn. Sleep doesn't come easily. Your voyage has begun, and already you sense that surviving it will take more than just endurance. It will take luck, and maybe even a miracle. By the second day, you realize there's no such thing as privacy aboard a ship like this. Every movement is watched, every cough heard, and every smell shared. You shuffle below deck where you'll be living, or rather, surviving. Imagine a crawl space lined with wooden ribs, low enough that you can't stand upright. Here, hammocks swing in layers like a cluster of cocooned moths. You're wedged shoulder to shoulder with men who haven't bathed since they left home, and whose idea of hygiene involves spitting over the railing instead of into the bucket. It is here you learn a basic truth. The ship is not large enough for the number of bodies it carries. A caravel like the Nina or Pinta might cram in 25 or 30 crew. The Santa Maria, perhaps 40. That's dozens of men stacked together in conditions more crowded than a cheap hostel at festival time. Historians still argue whether hammocks were widely in use in 1492, or if sailors simply slept on mats or directly on planks. But whichever option you get, it's miserable. The floorboards are alive quite literally with fleas, lice, and the occasional rat who scurries over your foot as though reminding you who really owns the place. When the bell rings for the change of watch, half the hammocks empty and half refill. There is no dedicated bedtime. You nap when you're not on duty, and your rest is interrupted by stomping boots above, arguments in Catalan or Basque, or someone accidentally rolling over and elbowing you in the ribs. If you were hoping for a gentle rocking lullaby from the waves, think again. The ocean doesn't sway, it lunges, jerks, and slams you against the planks. You try to make friends. The man next to you, Diego, has a laugh like a donkey's bray and a permanent stink of fish. He tells you he's sailed the Mediterranean and boasts of dodging pirates off the Barbary coast. Whether this is true or not, you can't tell, but he seems happy enough to recount his story 5 times a night. Another bunkmate prays loudly to St. Elmo before every watch, begging the saint to send guiding fire if storms arise. Someone else mutters that too much praying will anger the ocean. Superstition is the closest thing to entertainment here. Meals, such as they are, happen in the same cramped space. Salted meat hacked into chunks, hard biscuits that could double as building materials, and wine so sour you wonder if it hasn't turned into vinegar already. The water stored in barrels quickly becomes cloudy, and though nobody admits it, some men secretly prefer their wine precisely because it masks the taste of rot. You try to chew quietly, but there's no disguising the crunch of biscuit weevils. One sailor shrugs and says, "More protein," before downing his share with a grin missing 3 teeth. Even the sounds of the ship become part of your existence. The groan of timbers, the constant slap of waves against the hull, the scrape of ropes, the endless coughing and throat clearing of men inhaling too much brine and smoke. Sleep, when it comes, is shallow. And just when you think you found a moment of quiet, someone snores so loudly that you briefly consider whether throwing him overboard would count as mutiny. Historians still argue whether Columbus's men fully understood how long the crossing would be. Some say he deliberately downplayed the distance to keep morale. Others suggest the sailors themselves underestimated the misery of simply living packed together in a floating barrel. Either way, you're now realizing that the greatest challenge isn't storms or starvation. It's enduring the sheer, grinding claustrophobia of being trapped among dozens of unwashed strangers. The smell, the noise, the constant bumping of bodies. You can feel your sanity fray just a little with every passing night. Welcome to your new home. Breakfast arrives with a thud, not a flourish. A barrel is pried open, a sour wind escapes, and you're handed your first official meal, a slab of salted something that once answered to beef, a biscuit that could stop a crossbow bolt, and a tin cup of wine already drifting toward vinegar. The romantic painting in your head left out the part where the food fights back. The biscuit is Bisgoshut Weiss baked bread meant to survive months, not delight anyone. Tan, ridged, and dense enough to engrave. It yields only after you dunk it. The wine stains it ruddy and coaxes it from geological to merely architectural. A veteran taps his biscuit on a barrel hoop so the weevils tumble out. More protein. He winks. On rough watches, he doesn't bother. You decide not to ask follow-up questions. The meat looks better from a distance. Up close, brine clamps your tongue like a tiny iron. You shave thin slivers, let saliva work, and imagine oranges, though nobody remembers the taste. Mainstream fact. Unappetizing but certain. Standard rations on Iberian ships are hard biscuit, salted pork or beef, dried fish when lucky, a scrape of aged cheese, legumes like peas or chickpeas, and a daily measure of wine or watery beer. The kitchen is a small brazier bedded in sand on deck, because open flame near tarred rope and oiled canvas is how you turn a ship into a very brief comet. The cook is part juggler, part firefighter, part therapist. Pots swing on simple gimbal. On bad days, he declares stew and throws in whatever can be persuaded to soften: pork ends, fish scraps, a heel of cheese, an onion if the quartermaster is merciful, biscuit crumbs that surrender after an hour of thought. Water is a rumor that travels in barrels. On day 1, it tastes of oak. By day 10, it has become a pet cloudy and aromatic. Cloth over the bung strains the floaters. Rations are dipped out and never generous. The wine dulls both palate and complaint, and you find yourself praising a cup that would scandalize a vineyard. If you've ever described a drink as interesting, congratulations, you're ready for Atlantic vintage. Feast days still matter. The cook hoards a clove of garlic or a drizzle of oil for morale. Once, a basket of figs appears. 2 per man. A miracle that teaches you how quickly sweetness disappears at sea. Quirky tidbit. Whispered where officers can't hear. Some sailors insist maggots are a blessing. They argue the larvae eat the worst rot. leaving meat cleaner than it looks. You do not test this on purpose, but you notice later the crawling pieces smell less aggressively. The line to the cook is part hunger, part theatre. He keeps a mental ledger. Who hauled on the braces? Who scrubbed the deck? Who always complains? You learn sea cafeteria idioms. Whatever the sea permits means please. A bit more for the watch means we're about to be cold and wet. He plays stern, then nudges an extra ladle your way. Historians still argue whether Columbus's first voyage carried small livestock pigs or chickens for occasional fresh meat and egg saw, whether such luxuries waited for later settlement fleets. Space is scarce, and the smell would be mutiny enough. Still, a rumor persists that a hen laid an egg in the crow's nest. You file it under sailors' parables, hope and unreachable breakfasts. You try tricks to make rations less punishing. Biscuit becomes porridge if you surrender enough wine to the pot. Salt beef yields to repeated dunking in seawater. Someone swears the Atlantic seasons everything perfectly. You suspect he has simply lost feeling in his tongue. A Basque mate wraps fish in damp cloth and lays it near the brazier to steam. For a moment, the deck smells like a kitchen, and gulls circle as if considering reservations. Every few days, the quartermaster taps barrels with a mallet, listening like a physician. A dull thud means plenty. A hollow ring means someone has been tipping the cask at night. Theft. From stores draws the rope. You know it, and yet temptation hums like a violin string. Hunger redraws borders. You learn to eat with the ship's motion, lift the spoon when the bow rises, deliver when it falls. Otherwise the stew maps constellations on your shirt. One roll too violent, and the pot leaps. The cook snarls, the crew laughs, and dinner tells its own escape story. Laughter is seasoning. It keeps longer than garlic. The other mainstream truth of the age: nobody in 1492 understands vitamins. Scurvy is a word not yet nailed to a cause. Fresh produce is a miracle, not a plan. Gums will swell, old wounds may reopen, tempers will fray, and the cook will answer with more stew, because stew is what he has. Someone mutters that lemons could cure everything. Another replies he'd settle for a clean cup. As days stretch, your standards bend. Bread with dead weevils, brush and eat. Cheese that glistens a little too eagerly, scrape and eat. Wine that contemplates vinegar like a scholar contemplating retirement. Toast the moon and drink. You begin cataloguing flavors like a naturalist catalogues birds, notes of barrel, hints of rope, finish of regret. It's a game, and games keep hunger in its corner. Barter becomes a parallel economy. A needle earns you an onion. A stitched sleeve buys the last spoon of peas. You never imagined tailoring would feed you, but at sea, competence tastes better than glory. When the cook flips you the pot's heel, you catch it with both hands and thank any saint listening, Saint Elmo included, though you hope he spends his time negotiating with weather rather than the Panther time 0.95s, and then the sea gives. A school of flying fish vaults the rail and slaps onto the deck like silver rain. Men pounce, laughing like children, and the brazier works a miracle. Breakfast that was, moments ago, alive. You eat with your fingers, skin crackling, eyes bright. For a few hours you forget the barrel water, the iron beef, and the weevilled bread. You remember that food can taste like joy. The memory carries you through the next bowl of anonymous brown comfort and the cup of philosophy wine. You tuck your biscuit under your arm to keep it warm. Time. 6 fives, as if that might persuade it to kindness. It never does, but the gesture makes the men around you grin. And that, too, is a kind of nourishment. Morning bells rattle you awake long before your body is ready, and the first thing you hear is the boatswain's voice, carrying like a crow through fog. Up, all hands, scrub, haul, move. If you thought this voyage was an extended nap with an ocean view, consider this your rude awakening. Life at sea is not an idle drift, it's endless chores that make you wonder if anyone, anywhere, has invented the concept of weekends yet. Your first task is the deck. Buckets of seawater are hauled up, sloshed across the planks, and then scrubbed with brushes until your shoulders ache. The salt leaves your hands cracked, your nails ragged, but at least the decks smell briefly of something other than chamber pots. A ship must be kept dry and clean, or as close to clean as possible, because any spilled grease or damp patch is a banquet for rot. And trust me, the last thing you want beneath your feet is rotting wood in the middle of the Atlantic. After scrubbing, you're put to work hauling lines. The rigging of a 15th century ship is a jungle gym of hemp and knots. You squint upward, watching sailors scamper into the shrouds like wiry spiders. Someone shouts an order in Andalusian Spanish, and you pretend you understand while tugging on the rope in front of you. The sail flaps, the mast groans, and you quickly learn that if you pull the wrong rope at the wrong time, you don't just annoy your crewmates, you risk snapping the mast or ripping the canvas. Time. 5s. Nothing like a little performance anxiety when the entire voyage depends on not bungling your knots. Barefoot, you dodge splinters. The deck bristles with them, and your soles toughen faster than you'd think possible. Rope burns stripe your palms. You start to smell like tar, hemp, and sweat permanently. A sailor jokes that you could stand still and still smell like a working lantern. The cook's call is brief reprieve, though meal break is a generous phrase. You eat quickly, because if you linger, another officer will bark at you to swab, police, time, coin 65s, or haul something. Remember those biscuits. You now chew them while balanced on one foot, bracing yourself against a swinging boom. Forget candlelit suppers. This is dinner by slapstick. Every few hours, the bells toll to mark the watch change. You're assigned to one of the rotating watches, meaning half your life is spent hauling in the dark. Night watch is its own trial, the deck slick with dew, the wind hissing in the rigging, and your body begging for sleep while your hands coil, ropes numb as driftwood. Some men hum softly to stay awake. Others whisper prayers, hoping St. Elmo's fire will flicker on the mast to reassure them. You just hope you don't stumble overboard, because nobody will hear a splash under the crash of waves. One of your more curious tasks is rat duty. Yes, rats infest the ship, feasting on biscuit crumbs and chewing at the rigging. You learn to sleep with your blanket tucked tight, or risk a whiskered thief nosing at your ear. Someone insists the rats are good luck after all. They always seem to survive voyages when men do not. Historians still argue whether sailors encouraged cats on board during these early crossings, or whether space was too scarce for such luxuries. Either way, you realize you've joined an unholy fraternity, humans. Vermi Time, throw 65s, and rope all lashed together, trying not to sink. On rare afternoons when the sea lies calm, Columbus himself might pace the deck, cloak snapping in the breeze, and scold anyone he thinks is slacking. He looks every inch the admiral of the ocean sea, though you can tell by the twitch in his jaw he knows how fragile his authority is. Whispers of discontent already circle like gulls. You catch fragments. Some men grumble he's driving them too far west. Others mutter that no man has ever returned from such waters. You try to work quickly and keep your head down. Best not to be remembered when tempers flare. Still, there are lighter moments. A sailor sings a bawdy tune in a dialect you barely understand, but laughter fills the air. Another plays dice with knuckle bones. Someone balances a biscuit on his nose until the boatswain roars. Even in endless chores, you catch flashes of humanity, and those flashes keep despair at bay. But as the day winds down and the sky bleeds into red twilight, your arms throb from scrubbing, your shoulders sting from hauling, and you collapse into your hammock or plank, or corner of deck wondering how many more weeks of this routine your body can take. And then you remember, this is only the beginning. The first thing you notice, after a few days at sea, is that the air itself has turned against you. It's no longer the crisp tang of salt and breeze you imagined in your romantic sailing into history daydream. Instead, the ship radiates a thick, sour, miasman, unholy perfume of sweat, stale wood, brine, tar, and whatever died in the bilge 3 days ago. You try breathing shallowly, but it doesn't help. The smell has soaked into the planks, into the ropes, into your clothes, and now into your ski. Time. 95s. The latrine is nothing more than a plank with a hole, precariously jutting out from the side of the ship. You lower yourself gingerly, gripping rope for dear life, all the while staring at waves crashing below. One wrong roll of the hull, and you could become shark bait before you even finish. Worse, the plank is shared by everyone, which means you're waiting your turn with 40 anxious men who ate the same questionable stew. Privacy, not on the Atlantic. The chamber pots below deck are no better. At night, when the seas are rough, men relieve themselves where they can. A bucket sloshes, a rat scurries, and the stink grows heavier. The bilge lowest part of the ship collects the runoff of seawater, tar, spilled food, vomit, and urine. You'd think sailors would clean it often. They do, but only when the stench gets unbearable, which means it's already unbearable most of the time. Add to that the simple fact that bathing is a fantasy. Fresh water is too precious to waste on washing, so your skin grows tacky with salt, your hair stiff with grease, and your clothes permanently damp. Historians still argue whether sailors occasionally dunk themselves overboard on calm days for a bath, or whether such stories are the optimistic embroidery of later memoirs. In either case, you quickly accept that you're never going to smell clean again. The odor blends with the other indignities, the fishy stink of drying nets, the acrid smoke of the cook's brazier, the sour reek of rotting barrels. Your nose begins cataloguing varieties of foulness. One whiff tells you which barrel has turned. Another lets you know whose boots are molding. You even start guessing which crewmate is passing by in the dark, not by sight, but by the cloud of funk announcing them. Quirky tidbit: sailors sometimes stuffed herbs in their clothes or chewed cloves to disguise their stench. But such luxuries rarely made it past the first week. Instead, most men simply carried charms pieces of cloth, a coin, or a dried flower from home to sniff when the air became unbearable. You try it yourself once, pressing your sleeve to your nose as if it might filter the air. It doesn't. The smell wins every time. And then there's the livestock. Yes, a few pigs and chickens clatter about on deck, providing the promise of fresh meat later in the voyage. They add their own fragrant contribution to the mix. You try to ignore the squeals and feathers, but when a pig gets seasick, and yes, pigs get seasick, it is the sort of memory that etches itself permanently into your brain. One night, lying awake in the sweltering gloom, you wonder aloud how sailors endure months of this. Diego, the man with the donkey laugh, grins and says, "After a while, you don't smell it. You are it." Comforting thought. Historians still argue whether Columbus's ships were worse than other vessels of the period, or simply typical. Either way, your senses are assaulted daily, and you realize the real endurance test of an ocean voyage isn't braving storms or hunger, it's surviving the suffocating stew of odors, sounds, and filth. The ship itself becomes a body, and you are trapped in its stomach. When dawn comes, a faint breeze carries in fresher air. For a brief, blessed moment, you remember the scent of the open ocean, the salt and spray, before it mingled with human misery. You stand at the rail, gulping it like wine, trying to trick yourself into believing it will last. Then the cook opens a new barrel, and the illusion dies. The first storm doesn't come with cinematic warning. No sudden black wall of cloud, no booming thunder like a stage cue. Instead, it creeps in. The horizon darkens, the wind stiffens, and the ship begins to twitch under your feet like a nervous horse. By the time the order is shouted to reef the sails, the rain has already arrived cold, needling, and relentless. You scramble up the slick deck, clutching ropes that feel alive in your hands. The sail thrashes overhead like some furious beast, cracking and snapping as men climb into the rigging to wrestle it down. You've never envied acrobats, but now you look up in terror at sailors dangling in the storm's teeth, clinging to lines while waves hammer the hull. The ship lurches sideways. Barrels roll. A chicken squawks, and one unlucky sailor goes skidding across the deck until two others grab him by the collar. You taste salt on your lips, not from the sea breeze, but from seawater sluicing over the rails. You pray to any saint who will list a time, was op 65s, gripping the wood as though your palms could anchor the entire vessel. Mainstream fact, Columbus's ships were not designed for ocean storms. They were coastal craft, built for hugging the shore, not defying the mid-Atlantic's fury. Historians still argue whether his survival was due to skill, luck, or sheer stubbornness. But when you're there, in the middle of it, skill feels very far away. Luck feels like the only thing between you and the deep. The thunder arrives at last, rolling across the sky like giants dropping furniture. Lightning forks across the wave, and for a heartbeat, the whole world is a photograph rigging outlined in white, faces ghost pale. Columbus himself at the helm, jaw clenched, eyes glittering as though daring the storm to break him. Then the dark swallows everything again, and you are back to clutching blindly at wet wood, hoping your fingers hold. Below deck, chaos reigns. Water sloshes knee-high, Hammocks swing like pendulums, and men vomit until their stomachs are empty. Rats flee higher into the rigging, squealing like passengers demanding refunds. The smell of bilge water mingled with panic is unforgettable, though you desperately wish it were. Quirky tidbit: some sailors swear that if St. Elmo's fire-glowing blue light from static discharge appears on the mast during storms, it's a blessing. Others say it's a death omen. That night, when a faint ghostly flame flickers on the rigging, half the crew falls to their knees in prayer, while the other half mutters that you'd better start drafting your last words. You, uncertain which camp is right, simply close your eyes and hope neither saint nor sea monster is paying attention. The storm stretches on for hours, then days. Time ceases to exist except in jolts, lightning strikes, shouted orders, ropes tearing your palms, water in your eyes, salt on your tongue. You lose track of meals, of watches, of anything beyond holding the ship together. The sea roars, and the ship groans like a living thing, protesting every blow. At last, the wind eases. The rain thins to drizzle. The horizon softens back into blue-gray. Men collapse where they stand, soaked, trembling, but still alive. Columbus struts the deck, cloak plastered to his back, and declares that the storm was a test from God, proof that your voyage is blessed. You're too exhausted to argue, though in your mind you're pretty sure it was just weather. When the sun finally breaks through, warm and golden, it feels like a miracle. Clothes are spread across every line to dry. Men sprawl on the deck like shipwrecked survivors, and laughter bubbles up weakly, almost hysterically. The memory of terror lingers, though etched into your bones like a watermark. You stare out at the endless horizon, realizing that storms are not rare interruptions. They are part of the Atlantic's personality. You will face them again and again. Each one will threaten to break both ship and spirit. And you begin to wonder how many of these tests can a person survive before the ocean wins. The storm has passed, but the unease doesn't fade. Instead, it shifts. Now the sea lies calm and glassy, the sky wide and clear, and yet the men mutter more than ever. Why? Because the farther west you sail, the less anyone is sure of where you are or what lies ahead. Columbus walks the deck with a swagger, compass in hand, eyes on the horizon like he's reading secrets in the air. He insists he knows where you're going, that Sipangu, Japan lies just beyond the sunrise. But you've noticed the way he fiddles with his charts at night, how he keeps 2 sets of logs. Mainstream fact: Columbus deliberately kept a false log to show the crew shorter distances traveled than reality. Whether this was clever leadership or sly deceit is still debated by historians, but it means that even now, you don't actually know how far from Spain you've sailed. By day, navigation looks deceptively simple. A sailor peers through a cross-staff at the sun. Another plots latitude by Polaris at night. You watch them squint at stars, then scratch lines on parchment that look like doodles. You want to believe it's science, but in truth, open ocean navigation in 1492 is educated guesswork layered with hope. Historians still argue how much Columbus understood about currents and wind patterns, or whether sheer luck in finding the trade winds saved him from drifting into despair. The crew, meanwhile, whispers about edges, about falling off the map. True, Educated men of the 15th century generally knew the earth was round. But sailors, they live on rumour and tavern tales. You overhear mutterings that the horizon hides an abyss, that ships slide into the void with a scream. Others insist sea serpents the size of cathedrals wait to coil around your hull. At night, when the sea moans against the timbers, those stories don't feel like jokes. One quirky tidbit makes the rounds. A sailor swears that if you stare long enough at the horizon, you can see ghost ships fleets of the damned, sailing forever, their crews long dead. A few men refuse to look west at all, afraid of what their eyes might catch. You, meanwhile, try it once, and swear you see a flicker of white far beyond the waves. Foam, a gull, or something less explainable? You choose not to repeat the experiment. The monotony doesn't help. Every dawn brings the same: heave ropes, swab decks, choke down biscuit. Every night brings the same: stars, prayers, snores. Without landmarks, without the comfort of land in sight, the days blur together. A calendar without numbers. The men count time in barrels emptied and biscuits dwindled. And yet, amidst the dread, there are moments of awe. At twilight, the sky burns crimson and gold, and the sea mirrors it like molten glass. Time, duo 95s, dolphins race the bow, leaping in perfect arcs, as though mocking your heavy, groaning vessel. The water glows at night with phosphorescence, every wave breaking into sparks of green fire. You lean on the rail, exhausted but spellbound. The ocean terrifies, but it also enchants. Still, fear grows with each mile. The horizon remains stubbornly empty. Land does not appear. Columbus insists you're close, always close. The crew murmurs otherwise. Some want to turn back. Others are too afraid to admit it. You begin to wonder, which is worse, sailing into nothing, or admitting you've gone too far? The compass needle trembles, and so do you. It begins quietly. A sailor wakes with bleeding gums and shrugs it off. Another complains his legs ache strangely, like he's aged 20 years overnight. You notice your own mouth feels tender, your teeth sore when you bite the hard biscuit. Soon, the symptoms multiply. Skin bruises at the lightest touch. Old scars reopen as though the voyage itself has decided to unstitch the men. You don't know the word for it yet, nobody does, but you are meeting scurvy, the great invisible enemy of ocean voyages. Mainstream fact: the disease ravages crews deprived of fresh fruits and vegetables, though in 1492 nobody links it to vitamin C. Historians still argue whether Columbus's crossing lasted long enough for full-blown epidemics, but symptoms certainly creep in during weeks at sea without produce. The hammocks become hospitals. Men groan, clutching their swollen joints. Some lose teeth, others can barely stand their watch. You feel it yourself in small ways. Your gums tender, your breath foul, a weariness that sleep does not cure. And yet, there is no remedy the sailors know, beyond prayer and the occasional sip of sour wine. Quirky tidbit: a few sailors swear that chewing on leather straps soaked in seawater keeps illness at bay. Others nibble herbs saved from Spain, long since shriveled into tasteless threads. A Basque sailor insists that garlic cures everything, from storms to stomach aches, and eats cloves so pungent you'd almost prefer scurvy to his company. As sickness spreads, lice and fleas join the torment. They breed in beards, in the seams of tunics, in hammocks damp with sweat. At night, You scratch until your skin burns, then listen to the chorus of others doing the same. The rats grow bold, nosing through food sacks, gnawing on the biscuit barrels. Someone catches one and roasts it. The meat vanishes faster than anyone admits. Below deck, the air thickens with the stench of illness. Men cough, retch, and whisper prayers. Some fear plague. Others insist it's the devil testing your resolve. Historians still debate whether early sailors recognized scurvy as a distinct disease or simply blamed it on corrupted air. Whatever the theory, you feel the despair it sows. And yet, life continues. The ship still needs sails trimmed, decks scrub time, Giowanskid fives, ropes hauled. Sick men are pushed aside while the healthy stagger on. Columbus paces, promising land soon, always soon, as though words themselves could cure gums or bones. One evening, as the sun sets in a bloody smear, you watch a sailor spit into the sea and with it, one of his teeth. He laughs bitterly, tossing the tooth like an offering to the horizon. May the new world have dentists. He jokes, though his eyes betray fear. You clutch your jaw, suddenly aware of how fragile you are in this endless salt desert. Scurvy gnaws not just at bodies, but at morale. Every new bruise, every loosened tooth, is a reminder that the ocean is stripping you bare, piece by piece. You lie in your hammock, sore, itching, and half-starved, and you wonder if land never appears. How many of you will be left to see it anyway? Order on a ship isn't a suggestion. It's the only thing standing between you and a very wet, very permanent retirement. You learn this the hard way when the quartermaster discovers a wine barrel lighter than it should be. The bell clangs. Men assemble on the slick deck, eyes narrowed, jaws tight. The bosun coils a length of rope in his hand, not the mythical cat-o'-nine-tails of later centuries. Just a plain, knotted rope's end that stings like a swarm of hornets. Your mouth goes dry even before anyone speaks. Funny how justice always smells like tar and fear. The rules, such as they are time, 65s, live in the master's head and the officer's tempers. Fall asleep on watch, expect a beating. Answer back, enjoy extra watches and fewer rations. Steal from the stores, pray your friends still call you friend when you're put in irons. Mainstream fact, early Iberian crews enforced discipline with lashings, irons, the notorious bilbos, and reduced rations. Mutiny could mean hanging or being cast ashore at the first chance. There's no HR department, no grievance form, just the bosun's rope and the captain's word, two things that never seem to run short. The accused today is a skinny sailor with sea salt in his beard and terror in his eyes. He swears on 3 saints and a tooth from his grandmother that he only smelled the bung. He didn't drink. The wine stains on his sleeve argue otherwise. Men shift, uneasily. You feel that familiar churn in your gut, the one that says you'll be grateful punishment isn't yours, even as you hate seeing anyone take it. The bosun nods, and the rope kisses skin. You flinch with each strike, counting without meaning to. Each thud a punctuation mark in the ship's grammar of survival. Quirky tidbit, sailors sometimes call that knotted rope the persuader, as if discipline were a polite debate between equals. Another nickname the bishop suggests absolution comes with stripes. Either way, the lesson lands. Nobody speaks while the wind hisses through rigging like an unamused schoolmaster. When it's over, 2 men rinse the deck, Seawater runs pink for a heartbeat and then disappears into the Atlantic, as if the ocean is complicit in keeping secrets. Columbus appears only after the spectacle, cloak snapping, eyes measuring the crew like cargo. He speaks of order, of obedience, of God's favor on the steadfast. He has that tone half sermon, half sales pitch. Historians still argue whether he favored unusually harsh measures or if his brand of discipline matched the maritime norms of his day. The logs are tight-lipped, and the men who might have told the truth learned early that complaining didn't make good ballast. You watch the admiral's mouth move and think of the false log he keeps, the one that tells you each day is shorter than it feels. Numbers can lie. Rope doesn't. Punishment isn't just pain. It's time. Extra watch means you work when your bones beg for rest. Reduced ration means your biscuit turns from stale to stingy. Once, a sailor gets mast-hug duty for insolence, arms wrapped around the mainmast, while others step around him. A slow parade of humiliation. Another is made to scrub the bilge as penance, which you're pretty sure violates 3 separate commandments about human dignity. Time heap 95s. You learn to keep your answers short, your eyes down, your hands busy. If sarcasm were food, you'd be fed. Sadly, it is not. There's a theatre to justice here. Officers perform authority, crew performs contrition, and the ship demands the next scene. The bosun turns chastisement into choreography. The call, the coil, the crack, the clean-up. Even the gulls seem to know their cues, cackling at the worst possible moment, like cheap critics. And yes, there are jokes. Whispered later in the shadow of the boat, I'd give that performance 3 stars to much rope. Not enough plot. Humor is contraband, but it's the only thing no officer can confiscate. You notice who watches punishment with hard eyes and who looks away. The hard-eyed ones are dangerous when barrels run low and the horizon refuses to change. They keep lists in their heads: who got away with laziness, who stole, who laughed. The lookaways are soft now, but might snap later, like wet line under sudden strain. You wonder which you are becoming. The ocean is patient. It sculpts character the way it sculpts Woodslole, Time, Joe 65s, relentlessly, with sand and salt as chisels. On a calmer day, you hear an old helmsman tell a story about tying a culprit to a line and dunking him from the yardarm. Another swears that was more Dutch, and later, you decide not to ask for a live demonstration. Historians still argue whether such punishments appeared on Iberian ships of Columbus's era or crept in later with changing maritime codes. What you know for certain is this: men who make the sea their workplace will invent exactly as much discipline as the waves require. The Atlantic never signs the policy manual, but it enforces it. Punishment has a smell, too, not just tar and sweat, though those are there, but a metallic tang of fear that fills the lungs and lingers. After the rope, the ship quiets for hours. Work continues with a careful, almost reverent efficiency, like a monastery where the bell is tolled for compline. Lines are coiled neater. Decks are swabbed cleaner. Even the cook ladles stew with a ceremonial air, as though extra drips might constitute a misdemeanor. And yet, the line between discipline and cruelty frays when rations shrink and sickness grows. One night, a man breaks, sobbing in his hammock. The bosun pauses by him, rope slack at his side, and murmurs something you don't catch. The rope doesn't lift. The ship listens. You realize mercy exists here, but it arrives unannounced, and refuses to explain itself like dolphins at the bow or a breeze when the sails hang dead. There's a more private punishment few talk about: being forgotten. A sailor who can't pull his weight becomes invisible in 100 small ways. Conversations flow around him like water around a rock. Dice games close when he approaches. The cook forgets the extra ladle. Exile within a crowd is a particular kind of cold. You wrap your blanket tighter and promise yourself you'll haul harder tomorrow. The ship measures worth in rope lengths and bucketfuls, not in tensions. Still, the crew finds ways to push back that won't earn rope. A chorus of coughs drowns an officer's speech. A coil gets accidentally mislaid, so a bully has to fetch it himself. Someone tucks a carved saint into the flogged sailor's hammock. Resistance wears a quiet face out here. You think of St. Elmo's fire flickering blue at the mast. Was it a warning or a blessing? And decide that on this ship. Most things are both. As night falls, stars knit themselves across a sky rinsed clean by wind. You work your watch with careful hands, feeling the deck's pulse under your bare feet, the same pulse you felt on the day you boarded, only now you can read it. You haul when it surges, hold when it sinks. The bosun passes, gives your line a testing tug, grunts approval. It's not affection, but out here, it's close. When the bell finally frees you, you sink into your hammock, bruises old and new, humming like a low, tired song. You think of the skinny sailor, the pink water, the ocean swallowing evidence, the admiral's tidy word, time, 065s, and the many forms that order takes. You don't dream of land. You dream of a morning with no bell and a day when nobody counts the strokes. At sea, that's practically a fairy tale filed right between mermaids and hot bread. A few days pass, and the ocean seems to relax. The waves soften into rolling swells. The wind steadies into a sigh instead of a scream. And for once, you can eat without chasing your stew across the deck. Just when you think monotony has claimed you for good, the sea decides to show you its tricks. The first spectacle comes at dawn. Flying fish. They burst from the waves in glittering arcs, wings shimmering silver as they flap just enough to glide. They land on deck with wet thuds, flapping madly until sailors pounce, laughing like children. Breakfast, courtesy of the Atlantic, wriggles in their hands. Cook tosses them on the brazier, and suddenly the ship smells like something you'd actually order in a tavern. For a moment, you forget the biscuit. Later, a shadow bigger than the ship itself passes under the hull. You lean over the rail, squinting into green depths, and catch the pale flick of a tail, the length of a church spire. A whale exhales beside you, sending up a plume of spray that drenches the crew. Men cheer. Some cross themselves. One swears it winked at him. Historians still argue whether Columbus recorded encounters with whales on this voyage, or whether later chroniclers embellished the tale. What's certain is that seeing such a beast makes you realize how puny your wooden world is compared to the vast, breathing sea. Not all creatures inspire awe. Sharks circle sometimes, their fins slicing shadows near the hull. You try not to imagine falling overboard. Sailors murmur about their uncanny patience, how they trail ships for days as though knowing men will eventually slip. Quirky tidbit, some sailors called them sea lawyers, because they seem to follow relentlessly, waiting to claim their due. You sleep less soundly after learning that. Birds, too, arrive far from land. Gulls wheel and scream overhead, and once a tiny storm petrel darts through the rigging, quick as thought. Men see these as omens. Some claim birds mean land must be close. Others say the ocean simply toys with you, sending feathered hope with no shore to follow. You choose to enjoy the distraction anyway. On calm nights, you see stranger wonders. The sea glows with phosphorescent plankton, every ripple igniting green fire. You trail your hand in the water and watch sparks drip from your fingers. The crew hushes, caught between awe and unease. Is it a miracle or witchcraft? Historians still argue whether Columbus's men recorded these lights accurately or interpreted them as divine signs. In your hammock later, the image clings to your eyelids, like stars have spilled into the sea. And then, of course, the inevitable prank. Someone ties a scrap of cloth to a rope, tosses it overboard, and shouts, "Serpent!" Half the crew surges to the rail before realizing they've been duped. The laughter is worth the scolding that follows. Sailors are children with calloused hands. Give them boredom, and they'll invent monsters. The creatures of the Atlantic become part of the ship's rhythm. Whales awe you, sharks unnerve you, flying fish feed you, glowing plankton bewitch you. They remind you that this ocean isn't empty, no matter how wide and endless it looks. It is alive, and it watches. You lean on the rail at dusk, the sky painted purple and gold. Dolphins racing the bow in playful arc. Time. 95s. For a rare, fleeting moment. You feel a kind of peace, though deep down you know it won't last. The sea never lets you forget who's in charge. The sea gives wonders, but it also feeds anxiety in subtler ways. When storms sleep and the horizon stretches endlessly, the crew's eyes turn inward to charms, rituals, and omens. You start to realize that every man on this ship clings to something invisible, something that helps him survive the crushing uncertainty of sailing where maps dissolve into blank parchment. Morning begins with prayers. Not quiet, private devotion, but half the crew kneeling on the deck, crossing themselves in unison as the boatswain mumbles the Lord's Prayer. Columbus himself sometimes leads, voice booming like a parish priest. Historians note his piety was fierce, though whether it was heartfelt faith or political performance is still debated. Either way, the sight of an entire deck transformed into a floating chapel is unnerving when you're still rubbing sleep from your eyes. Superstition fills the gaps between scripture. A sailor refuses to cut his hair, convinced that losing a lock will anger the sea. Another keeps a bone carved with runes, swearing it wards off storm. Time 095s. You've seen dice rattled not just for gambling, but for divination. 2 6s means safe passage. Snake eyes means pray harder. A Basque sailor ties knots in a cord, claiming each one traps a favorable wind. He unknots them carefully on still days, holding the line up as if the breeze itself might spill out. Quirky tidbit: some men fear bananas on board. Yes, bananas. Rumor says they bring bad luck, causing ships to vanish. Nobody on this voyage even has bananas, but the taboo is so strong that a single joking mention is enough to earn dirty looks. You learn quickly that humor has border. Time. 95s. The religious rites multiply as weeks pass. One evening, as the sun dyes crimson, a sailor spots St. Elmo's fire bluish light flickering on the mast tips. Half the crew falls to their knees, thanking the saint for his protection. The other half whispers, it's a death sign. The glow lingers like a ghost, refusing to explain itself. Historians still argue whether Columbus's men saw such lights on this voyage or on later ones, but the fear and awe would have been the same. When sickness spreads, prayers intensify. Men press holy medals to swollen gums, mutter Ave Marias over bruised limbs. You see dice cast, bones read, coins kissed before they vanish into the sea as offerings. One sailor carves a crude cross into the mast itself, as though nailing his plea directly into the ship's heart. Columbus doesn't stop it. Perhaps he believes, or perhaps he knows fear is easier to control when it's kneeling. The rituals sometimes clash. Catholics chant, Basque sailors whisper old mountain charms, and one Moorish convert mutters verses under his breath, ignored but not unnoticed. The deck becomes a babel of belief. Each man, sure his ritual alone, holds back the abyss. You wonder whether the ocean laughs at all of it or whether it listens. By now, the line between devotion and desperation is thin. Every creak in the timbers becomes a sign, every gull a message, every spark in the waves a prophecy. You clutch the rail one night, watching stars blaze over the Black Sea, and you can't help but think, perhaps faith, superstition, and fear are all just different sails catching the same wind. Without them, the voyage would sink before the ship ever did. The days begin to stretch into one another like over-pulled rope. Wake, scrub, haul, eat, scratch, sleep, repeat. Without land or landmarks, time itself becomes slippery. You're not sure if you've been at sea for 4 weeks or 4 years. The sun rises, the sun sets, and you feel as though you're walking in circles on a floating treadmill. The monotony is crueler than storms. Storms at least give you drama, adrenaline, the sharp taste of survival. Calm seas give you nothing but endless sameness. The horizon doesn't change. The sky stays pitilessly wide. Some mornings, you swear the sun climbs in exactly the same place it set. The men begin to mutter that you're not moving at all, that the ship is trapped in a watery purgatory. Mainstream fact, Columbus's first crossing lasted over 5 weeks before land was sighted. 5 weeks of biscuit, brine, and horizon. Historians still argue whether the crew's patience was stretched to the breaking point, or if their endurance was greater than later legends suggest. You, pressed shoulder to shoulder with itchy, hungry, stinking men, are inclined to believe the former. Small annoyances grow into torments. Someone's snore becomes a personal vendetta. A dropped ladle triggers a fistfight. You overhear the same joke for the 40th time and wonder whether laughter itself has grown rancid. Even dreams turn sour. You wake convinced you've heard waves whispering words you can't quite catch. Quirky tidbit, sailors sometimes carved elaborate little games into biscuit scraps or bits of rope-miney dice, crude chess pieces, anything to give shape to the emptiness. You try once, scratching a game board into a plank. Diego with the donkey laugh joins in, and for half an hour, you forget the ache in your gums. Then the bosun bellows, and the board is scrubbed away. Time, 065s, leaving you back in the grey wash of sameness. Men fill the void with stories, but even those run dry. At first, you heard tales of sea monsters, of sirens, of golden cities waiting across the horizon. Now the stories loop like a broken reel. You find yourself finishing them aloud, to groans and curses. Someone mutters that if land doesn't appear soon, they'll strangle the next man who mentions Chipangu. The weather doesn't help. Days of dead calm leave the sails limp, the ship drifting aimlessly. The sun beats down, unbroke, time derosusi fives, until the deck is too hot to touch. Sweat stings your eyes, salt stiffens your shirt, and there's no relief but tepid, foul water ladled from a half-spoiled barrel. You imagine the cool of a stream back home, and it almost makes you cry. And then there are the nights the nights. The stars blaze so bright they seem to press against your skull. You lie in your hammock, staring at the ceiling, but the stars invade your dreams anyway. Men whisper that maybe you've sailed so far you're drifting under a different sky entirely, a sky no Christian has ever seen. Someone mutters that maybe you've left the world altogether. Historians still argue whether mutiny was imminent at this stage, or whether Columbus's charisma held the crew together better than later tales suggest. All you know is that patience is thinning like worn canvas. The ocean hasn't broken you with storms or beasts. It's breaking you with nothingness, with the sheer oppressive weight of forever. You stand at the rail one morning, biscuit in hand, watching the horizon. The sea is flat, the sky blank, your food tasteless. And you wonder, not for the first time, if this is what eternity feels like, chewing dust, time, Cossacks fives, breathing salt, staring at nothing. By now, the air on deck is heavy, not just with salt and sweat, but with suspicion. Every glance feels sharper, every whisper longer, and every sigh of frustration hangs like a threat. You can sense it in the way men grip ropes tighter than necessary, in the silence that follows Columbus's speeches, in the muttered curses that rise like smoke after he passes. The word is never said outright, but you hear it in the pauses: mutiny. Columbus continues to stride the deck with his usual confidence, reading from his false log, insisting land is only days away. But the crew is no longer buying it. They know the provisions are thinning. The water is rank. The biscuits are dust. They feel the aches in their bodies and see the emptiness of the horizon. Historians still argue whether the crew truly reached a breaking point or if the later stories exaggerated the drama for legend's sake. But as you stand among the sailors, listening to their grumbles sharpen into promises, you're convinced rebellion isn't just possible, it's inevitable. One night, you lie in your hammock and overhear Diego, donkey laugh hushed, whispering with two others. They talk about seizing the helm, about forcing the admiral to turn back east. Their voices tremble with both fear and excitement. Someone insists they could dump Columbus overboard and claim it was an accident. The thought makes your stomach knot. It's one thing to joke about sea monsters. It's another to imagine your captain feeding the sharks. Quirky tidbit, sailors sometimes staged mock trials of unpopular officers, parodies of justice acted out in the dark to blow off steam. You witness one of these, men balancing a barrel as a judge's bench, condemning an absent officer to 50 lashes of the moonlight. Laughter softens the tension, but beneath it you sense the hunger for the real thing. Columbus, for his part, seems aware. He makes a show of promising rewards, gold, titles, land in Asia. He speaks of God's providence, of destiny, of how the monarchs of Spain themselves have blessed this voyage. His voice is steady, but his eyes flicker too often toward the restless clusters of men. You wonder if he sleeps at night, or if even he hears the mutiny breathing under the deck. The officers enforce harsher discipline now. Every spilled ladle, every missed knot earns a curse or a rope's in. Yet instead of cowing the men, it feeds their anger. You feel it in your own chest, too, that slow, simmering sense that you're drifting not toward glory, but toward oblivion. And then, the breaking point nearly arrives. One dusk. A group gathers near the bow, voices raised. Turn back. Someone shouts, "We'll all die out here." Others join in, the first open defiance you've heard. Hands tighten on knives and belaying pins. You half expect blood. But Columbus storms forward, cloak whipping in the wind, and delivers a speech that silences even the angriest voices. He swears land is close, swears it on his life, swears it on the souls of every sailor's children. He bargains, give him 3 more days, and if no land appears, they'll turn back. 3 days, a sliver of hope, or a stay of execution. Historians still debate whether this exact ultimatum happened, but the tension is real in your bones. You lie awake that night, rocking in your hammock, listening to the creak of timbers and the steady, low murmur of mutiny. You realize the voyage is no longer a question of survival at sea, it's a question of survival among men. The ocean is vast, the storms terrifying, the food miserable. But the real danger now is the man standing next to you, clutching his knife, wondering if tomorrow he'll need to use it. The 3 days tick by like a drumbeat. Each sunrise finds the crew craning their necks at the horizon. Each sunset dropping their shoulders a little lower when the sea remains the same flat expanse of grey and blue. You feel the air tighten, as if the whole ship is holding its breath. Even the gulls have vanished, as though unwilling to witness whatever comes next. On the 3rd night, the mood shifts. A cry goes up from the Pinta Tierra. Land. Men leap from hammocks, rush to the rails, eyes straining through the dark. Shapes flicker on the horizon, shadows, smudges, promises. You think you see a faint glimmer, like a lantern on shore. The deck erupts into shouting, laughter, even tears. Columbus puffs up like a rooster, striding about declaring vindication. But dawn reveals nothing, only more water. The cries of joy curdle into curses. You feel it deep in your gut that lurch between hope and betrayal. Historians still argue whether the Pinta truly sighted land time, Geo 6.5s, or if it was only mist, cloud, or even wishful thinking. In the moment, it doesn't matter. The crew feels toyed with, and tempers boil hotter than ever. And then, just when violence feels inevitable, signs appear. A branch floats past, green leaves still fresh. A carved stick drifts by, its ends smoothed by tools, not waves. Later, a flock of birds wheels overhead, tropical birds, not the oceanic kind that can fly for weeks without rest. The men grip the rail with trembling hands. Whispering, daring to believe again. The tension breaks on October 12th, when the cry goes up once more, land, real land, unmistakable this time. A dark line on the horizon, rising steadily into hills and trees. Shouts shake the masts. Hats fly into the air. Grown men kiss the deck beneath them. You realize you're laughing too, half from joy, half from sheer relief that the ocean hasn't swallowed you whole. Columbus insists on being rowed ashore first. Of course, banners snapping, prayers booming, as though the entire new world has been waiting just for him. You and the others follow, wading through surf that feels like baptism, kissing sand that tastes better than any stew or wine. For the first time in weeks, you smell earth-real earth loam, leaves, flowers. It nearly makes you dizzy. Quirky tidbit. Later stories claim sailors dug fistfuls of dirt and stuffed it in their pockets, afraid the land might vanish if they didn't anchor themselves to it. You consider doing the same. After weeks of endless horizon, the feel of soil between your fingers feels like a miracle. Historians still debate how much the crew understood of what they'd found. To them, this was Asia, or an island near it. The idea of an entirely unknown continent wasn't yet on the table. You watch Columbus plant his flag, hear his proclamations in a booming voice, and wonder if he believes his own words. The men feast on coconuts and fruit offered by the islanders, their mouths alive again with flavors they'd half forgotten. Teeth no longer ache, gums feel soothed, and spirits soar. The mutiny dissolves as if it never existed, washed away by the green miracle of land. You, half-starved and half-crazed, collapse on the sand, staring at the sky. For the first time in weeks, it doesn't look like a prison. It looks like freedom. The moment your boots sink into the sand, you swear you'll never set foot on a ship again. The island is green, damp, fragrant with flowers you don't know the names of, and every breath feels like a cure. You stretch out your arms and let the sun warm skin that has only known salt and mildew for weeks. Around you, men collapse in laughter, some weeping openly, others kissing the ground as though it were a long-lost lover. Yet even in this relief, the cost of the voyage clings to you. Your gums still ache, your stomach cramps from fruit you've devoured too quickly, and your body feels like it's aged a decade in a month. Diego, donkey-laughed Diego, has lost weight you can't believe he had to spare. Another sailor hides the gap where two teeth used to be, and the scarred memory of storms, filth, and punishment is etched into everyone's faces. Columbus, of course, struts ashore as if he has discovered heaven itself. Banner raised, cloak snapping, time Joe 65's, voice booming declarations no one here can fully understand. To him, this is triumph, proof of his genius, validation of his stubbornness. He ignores the sunken cheeks and trembling limbs of the men behind him. Historians still argue whether his leadership saved the voyage or nearly doomed it. But in this moment, he shines like a man convinced God himself is his navigator. You look around at the islanders watching from the trees, eyes curious, wary. They bring fruit, water, trinkets of gold. You taste a guava sweet, lush, bursting with juice, and your mouth tingles as though waking from hibernation. The scurvy pain eases, your body remembering what health feels like. It is paradise in your mouth, a cruel reminder of what you lacked. Quirky tidbit. Some sailors scoop up sand and pack it into their pouches, terrified the island might vanish like a dream when they return to sea. Others pluck leaves and press them flat between biscuit scraps. One man whispers, he'll never wash the dirt off his hands. You feel the same urge to hoard the smell of green, the touch of solid earth, to anchor yourself to reality again. But even paradise has shadows. You overhear Columbus already plotting. Gold, conversion, conquest. His eyes are on the horizon, not the present. You realize the voyage isn't over. It's only the beginning of something far larger. heavier. For now, though, you're too weary to care. You sink onto the sand, feeling it mold against your body like a bed you've been waiting for all your life. The price has been staggering: rancid food, foul water, storms, disease, the constant threat of mutiny. You left Spain with hope. You arrive half-starved, half-mad, wholly changed. And you can't help but ask yourself, was it worth it? As the sun sinks in a blaze of orange, you close your eyes. The surf whispers against the shore, gentler now, no longer a prison wall, but a lullaby. For the first time in weeks, you feel safe, and slowly, gently, you let yourself drift into sleep. Now the storm has passed. The voyage is behind you, and the hard edges of memory soften. You're no longer pressed shoulder to shoulder in stinking hammocks, no longer clutching ropes while waves crash overhead, no longer staring into an endless horizon that offers nothing but silence. Instead, picture yourself lying on warm sand, the island air wrapping around you like a blanket. The sea, once cruel and immense, is now a soft murmur, steady and calm. Take a slow breath. The tang of salt that once burned your throat is now gentle, mixed with the sweetness of fruit and flowers. Another breath. Your muscles, once locked in strain, begin to ease, as if the island itself is carrying your weight. You feel your heartbeat slow, your hands unclench. Even the bruises, the sores, the hunger, all of it fades. Here, replaced by stillness, let the images dissolve into a haze. The creak of the ship, the crack of the rope, the endless grey sky, all of it is drifting further away. In its place, the rhythm of waves becomes your guide, steady, unhurried. Each one a reminder that the hardest journeys eventually come to rest. Allow yourself to sink deeper into that quiet. Imagine the stars above, not as ominous witnesses, but as distant, comforting lanterns. The night air is cool, the sand warm, the ocean endlessly patient. You've survived, you've endured, and now, at last, you are safe enough to close your eyes without fear. So breathe, slowly, gently. Let the tide carry your thoughts further and further out, until nothing remains but calm. The voyage is over. Rest is yours. Sleep well.